Are we good to go? Ethan? Oh, I see the recording button.
We're good to go, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I see the recording button. So the speaker we have today is Lee Bruch. Lee Bruch is from Seattle Neighborhood Greenways. And Seattle Neighborhood Greenways is a coalition of 16 neighborhood-based volunteer-led chapters. It was founded in 2011 with the vision of making every Seattle neighborhood a great place to walk, bike, and live. And Seattle Neighborhood Greenways does not just work exclusively on neighborhood greenways, though establishing neighborhood greenways was one of its earliest wins. Seattle Neighborhood Greenways provided the vision, community outreach, and momentum that led city leaders to incorporate neighborhood greenways, which are traffic calmed streets that are safer for walking and biking, into Seattle's bicycle master plan. And Lee himself is a leader specifically of the Lichtenholler chapter of the Seattle Neighborhood Greenways, where Holler Lake neighborhood is located. Lichtenholler Greenways meets every second Tuesday of the month in conjunction with Greenwood Finney Greenways. And I'm sure Lee will tell you more about how you can participate. And Lee, I'm going to hand it over to you for your presentation. And I'm going to switch here for a second to your slides as well. Momentary interruption.
Thanks, Anastasia. This is Lee Bruch from Lichtenholler Greenways. And I must reemphasize that Seattle Neighborhood Greenways doesn't just address greenways. It's the entire feeling and environment around Seattle streets that we're really concerned with. And one of the important things is it's not just safe streets, and streets aren't just pavement, but they're the whole entire matrix for the city. And so it's really important for the existence and experience in the city and for all groups at any economic or any level to be using our streets and being able to use our, to be able to enjoy our streets. The Lichtenholler Greenways, actually, Susie Zook from the Holler Lake area, and I started the Lichtenholler chapter probably 5 or 6 years ago. And we used to be meeting in the basement of the Holler Lake Community Club in the boardroom, I think they call it. When Eagle's staff was being designed and considered, we got very highly involved in that because that had all sorts of implications for travel for the students, families, faculty. And in doing that, we found that the people over in the Greenwood area were equally involved. So in fact, we sort of got both groups together and started meeting jointly, and we still do. So we have a lot of people from the Greenwood and Finney area in our group, and the Broadview area, as well as Licton Springs and Holler Lake, of course. The immediate priorities of Seattle Neighborhood Greenways have been changed a bit. At the beginning of 2000, actually at the end of 2019, we established some priorities such that that's where the staff would put most of their emphasis. But because of the changes with the pandemic and because of the social justice uprisings, we adjusted some of the priorities. And one of the priorities out of that was reimagining traffic enforcement, playing off whose streets, our streets. We decided to advocate to get armed police out of traffic enforcement and have some other means of enforcing traffic regulations and traffic safety. We can't ignore safety and enforcement, but whether it should be armed police is another question. One of the other things we got involved in were the stay healthy streets and the cafe streets, and emphasized very highly during the pandemic and during the COVID issues that by having cafe streets where people could have their, and restaurants could have their tables out in the street or the sidewalks, would be very beneficial for a lot of our neighborhood restaurants. And we were the group that pushed very hard to get that accepted. And now from what I understand, I might be wrong about this, but I think it's now projected to extend through this next year until October by the city. Stay healthy streets, same thing. The stay healthy streets, I think you probably are all aware of, where there are streets that are open to local traffic, but closed to through traffic and made a lot safer for people to get outside and to join with others while social distancing. And then safe, healthy bridges is one of the other major priorities, because most of our bridges have very narrow sidewalks, and the city has started to recognize that they have to do something with the bridges anyway. So we've made that a priority to start addressing the bridges and the narrowness and the dangers for bicycles and pedestrians. What I was going to address is what's happening both around Northwest Seattle to make things safer and more comfortable. In addressing that, two things happened today that I'll just add in right here. As you may have heard, may not have heard, there was a fatality where a pedestrian was hit by a driver on Aurora at 137th. And Aurora has always been one of our priorities in trying to get that safer for people. And there's going to be more drive towards that. The second thing that came out today is Shoreline has been doing the studies for 145th. Actually, it's going to be a joint thing with Shoreline, WSDOT, King County, number of other groups, including Seattle. But Seattle has so many other things going on that they've taken quite a back seat on that project. And so Shoreline is being the lead agency for that. Just today, they may have announced it a few days ago, but it got in the news today that they and WSDOT are looking at the 145th and I-5 intersections. And they are expecting to put, or they're looking at right now, putting a large traffic circle, not just like the little neighborhood traffic circles, but a large traffic circle at Fifth Avenue and on the east side and over at Corliss on the west side. Getting rid of the signals and having people manipulate to and from the freeway and across 145th through the traffic circles. I have quite a bit of experience in Bend and a little bit of experience in Europe, and traffic circles work very well. So it'll be very interesting how that all comes out. One of the bad things about traffic circles is when you have a traffic light, it goes red and green alternating, and that creates a rhythm on the street of a lot of traffic and then gaps in the traffic. With a traffic circle, you have continuous traffic. So that may have major implications on all the other side streets that cross 145th, both to the west and to the east. May be a thing to be of concern about. Where I was going to start on the existing what's happening is on the next slide, Northgate Elementary School. The school departments, the code department departures that the school has asked for that are very standard for all the schools. The city has never had a zoning zone for schools. Rather, they put all schools in whatever zone that it happens to be in. But that doesn't fit for schools. So traditionally, every school then has departures that'll allow for the school to exist. So the school departures have been proposed and recommended by Department of Neighborhoods. And I'll go into those in a little bit. The zoning and permit part of the city is not very far along at all on approving Northgate Elementary. Usually on their website, they publish all of the submittals by the proponents, all the comments that are received, and all the responses from that the city has made to their. Currently, there's nothing posted other than the school departures. It is unknown. I've been trying over the last few days to get more of a feel, both from some of the project managers in the in Seattle Public Schools and the city, and haven't gotten a very clear definition yet. I think everyone is at both the city level and the school level is their normal processes have been disrupted a bit because of the COVID issue and because of the budget issues that are consequent from the COVID issues. So it may be longer than they had originally expected before a lot more happens at the permitting level. That also applies to routes to the school. Usually by this time, we're working the School Traffic Safety Committee, of which I'm a member, and the city and SDOT are working on and have pretty well defined some of the issues that need to get addressed on the routes to schools. But again, that's that's awaiting a whole lot of things, including the 2021 budget decisions that are right now being hammered out between the mayor and council. The proposed site plan is the next slide. And this shows the proposed plan of the school. The main entrance in the school will be in the northeast corner, right adjacent to the corner of 120th and First Avenue. Along 120th is where people will be driving the students. Seattle Neighborhood Greenways and the School Traffic Safety Committee both are trying to encourage citywide people to get to school in another way other than getting driven to school. It's much healthier, and it's been proven to actually change and improve the kids' retention of information in the school. But they'll put a new sidewalk along 120th and then have people being able to park and unload their students. The buses they'll be along First Avenue Northeast. We've looked at the past Eagle Staff and Cascadia Elementary at 90th and Wallingford are a good example where you put the buses on the major street adjacent to the street that at first appears to be counterintuitive. But in fact, what happens is the buses themselves make it very apparent to people when they're driving, and it does tend to make people slow down as they're going through the school, going by the school, which is a big safety benefit. One of the other things is with an entrance right at the corner, it promotes people crossing at the corner where people are a little bit safer rather than mid-block. The next page describes some of the code departure requests that were made. There was a departure request for building height. That was granted. Parking quantity, that was conditioned on working with the neighborhood to establish a communication about major events that would happen at the school. And during the major events, they will actually be using the playground for a lot of parking. It requires on a departure request to have on-street bus loadings, and that was granted. There's a message board that they put along the street, and that requires a departure, and that was conditioned towards time of use. And then the bicycle parking, the code is a little bit ambiguous and is in the process of being revised for the bicycle parking, but it's not yet totally revised. They conditioned it to require half of the original, the current legal bicycle departing. On the next slide, I show a little bit about how SDOT and ourselves and others have been working on trying to get better walking and biking routes to the school. And you can see that green dotted area. It would serve the whole neighborhood well. Right now, if you're biking, as an example, or walking and want to go from the north to the south of Holler Lake, the only thing to do is go on Meridian and then on that hexagonal street past very awkward intersections. We have been promoting using Ashworth as a way of detouring around a lot of that. Ashworth is, most of it is pretty well done now. The traffic calming is as good as it should, as hopefully it will be. There was going to be a traffic light at 130th where Ashworth crosses, a pedestrian activated light, which would help both the high school and everyone using that pathway. And that has been put on a budget hold. It was actually going to be done this year, in 2020, this last summer. But with the COVID, that was put on budget hold. And we've seen no evidence that the city is going to take that off budget hold quickly. It may take a lot of pressure by the neighborhood and others to get that reinstituted. We've been talking, we had hoped that it would be one of the things that city council would add to the mayor's budget, the mayor's proposed budget for 2021, but that has not yet occurred. The other thing that was going to happen is they're going to do a pedestrian lighting study at that area right behind the public works yard, and which is pretty dark when it's dark, and that hasn't gone very far, again because of the budget issues, but hopefully that would get pushed with the improvements. That'll help a whole lot of things. It'll help bicycles around Holler Lake. It'll help getting to the high school, and it'll help getting to and from Northgate Elementary. One of the other things that we had asked is we had asked for the school district to give us some heat maps of where students live. You don't want to show where students, specifically where students live, but you want to show where clusters of students in the general area for clusters of students, such that you can plan routes along those major clusters. One of the major clusters is down behind the Home Depot near 115th. Both the school district and SDOT are working through some problems, some legal problems about transmitting that sort of information, so that SDOT can put it on some maps. Well, and mostly because of the security of information about students. So hopefully that'll get resolved, and hopefully over the next half year, we'll start to see some of those maps, which will help not only around Northgate Elementary, but other schools in Seattle. On the next slide, one of the other great big issues in the area is the 130th and 145th Street stations that are obviously going to do some major changes to the whole nature of the neighborhood. It's in process by the Office of Planning and Community Development and of the city. And you've probably already been aware of the various meetings that they've had. They have a website where you can check on what they're doing. As part of that study, There's been a study for 130th and 145th Street multimodal access plan. With the stations, there's going to be a tremendous change in the traffic up here, people going to and from the station. And because of the additional amount of people that are going to be living in the area just because of the station. This map shows just some of the alternatives that are being considered. It's very interesting that if you look where that number 7 is over on the left-hand side, that's 137th. And 137th is one of the things being considered in the multimodal access plan to be one of the greenways to east-west within the city. And in so doing, they would put a traffic signal at Aurora. And that is the identical place that the person was killed yesterday evening. So hopefully something will transpire there. Again, I've put on the original slide the URL to get there, to get the information about the multimodal access plan. If you just Google 130th and 145th Street station multimodal access, you will probably get the a large page and a collection of pages about that access plan. The next slide goes into the city budget, which right now the mayor proposed her budget on September 29. In that proposal, SDOT's budget was cut by 20%. And that's going to have major implications of all sorts of things that are being done. The city council is reviewing the budget. They've been having a whole series of discussions and public hearings throughout the month of October. This week, last week, the council members all submitted their individual proposed changes. And there was a lot of discussion about those. And then this week, that's being resolved or being fought over. And by next Monday, the chair of the city council's budget committee, which is the entire council, will be presenting their proposed changed budget. And then there'll be some discussions back and forth with the city, with the mayor's office, the council, and hopefully the entire new budget for 2021 will be approved on about the 23rd of November. Last year, that was about the same as their plan, and it ended up about a week later before it actually got approved. Seattle Neighborhood Greenways has been working very intently and negotiating with some of the council members on trying to get the amount of monies for the Seattle, for SDOT to be increased. We have partnered with many other groups to form a thing called MASS. It's a correlation of all of many groups around Seattle. MASS stands for Move All of Seattle Sustainably. And they have a huge amount of requests. Some of them have been adopted. in the proposals that council's now talking about. The 4 planks that they've, then the next slide will, the 4 planks that have made it through so far are to upgrade Rainier Avenue sidewalks in Southeast Seattle. There's a real problem with sidewalks throughout Seattle. 20% of the, around between 20 and 25% of the block faces in Seattle don't have sidewalks, including on major arterials. And where they have sidewalks, many of them are in bad condition. One of the problems, obviously, around Heller Lake, Aurora being an example. We put up a spatial emphasis on Rainier Avenue, mainly because of social justice issues, but also because that is the most dangerous street in Seattle. More people have been killed and seriously injured, both driving, but also biking and walking along that than any other street in Seattle. So we pushed very hard to get some more monies for that. And it appears that there's a good chance that that'll be adopted. Similarly, especially because of the West Seattle Bridge problem, and also because of some equity issues in the whole Georgetown area. Seattle Neighborhood Greenways has been working with a whole lot of other people and Mass to create a Georgetown to South Park trail. And that has made it through some of the suggestions that are being put forward in council. Similarly, there's going to be a problem at the University District Station when it opens, because there's no way to actually safely get across I-5 in that area without detouring a long way down towards the Burke-Gilman. To get to there from the west part of Seattle. So, and the Route 44, which is the major bus route that goes east-west along 45th Avenue, has always had problems in the amount of traffic and the need. It's a very heavily used route. So there were a whole bunch of things planned for that area that got cut in the mayor's budget this year because of the pandemic, the budget crisis. And hopefully some or all of those cuts will get canceled. We worked, Seattle Neighborhood Greenways and Mass worked very hard on that. We don't know for sure the outcomes there. And then the final thing was advance the planning and early design for bike networks in South Seattle. We've been pretty good up here. We pushed a whole lot, especially with Eagle staff coming online a few years ago, to get some east-west bike routes, which we finally got down a little bit further south, 92nd, 100th. And obviously we should have some more up here in the north, but right now, especially because of some of the social equity issues, we're pushing very hard for those sort of changes to happen in South Seattle, because they don't have nearly the bike facilities and the pedestrian safety facilities that we're fortunate to have up in the North Seattle. So that's just a brief summary of some of the things that are happening that Lichtenholler Greenways has been involved in, and the Seattle Neighborhood Greenways has been involved in, as they happen in the budget. One of the things that we do is that we've gotten used to a lot of the people in SDOT and have very good communications with a lot of the people in SDOT, and in a lot of the council offices. And that is very important in our advocacy. It's very handy that all the groups that form Seattle Neighborhood Greenways help each other. And one group might have good input to certain people in SDOT. Other groups might have good input to certain of the council members. And so we share information back and forth, and that makes advocacy much more effective. When you're talking with a council member, and if they know who you are and have met with you a number of times, there's more chance it's going to listen to you. So I've been quite involved with Council Member Juarez, with the District 5 network, and a number of the community councils up here, so that we can have some volume behind our advocacy. We're right now in the process of defining the priorities that we want to continue on in 2020 and 2021. There are major priorities in 2020 that we may want to, that we're probably being continued, some of them in 2021 are safe routes to schools, more and slower speed limits. Aurora being an example, we want to bring that down to the speed limit of other arterials in Seattle. And actually SDOT and WashDOT are currently negotiating that between them. And we wanted to make sure that some of the precepts of the program of Vision Zero, which is formally adopted by the city, that actually happens. Vision Zero being trying to get to no deaths in the streets of Seattle. Traffic signals for people, one of our other issues. Right now, a lot of places, people are, traffic is promoted over people, and the traffic lights signals are timed and operated to smooth traffic flow without any regard for people trying to cross the street. There are ways to combine the two issues. We're trying to push that. Sidewalk repair. The city traditionally doesn't do sidewalk repair. They rely on individual neighbors. And in fact, that's part of what is legally the responsibility of the adjacent property owner. We're trying to get the city to be a little bit more forceful on that. One, to ask people to take their responsibility, but for the city itself to take responsibility in a lot of locations as well. Home zones, being a whole lot of adjacent streets in a neighborhood, make them all slow zones. so that they're safe for people to be able to walk in, and the car and make the cars be the guest on the street, as opposed to the other way around. Basic bike network, the pedestrianization of a lot of Seattle, equity. Those have all been various priorities. What are the scooters, racial equity and action plan and movement expansion, Georgetown, South Park Trail, Beacon Avenue, Rainier Avenue, Aurora Avenue. Those have all been priorities in the past, and we're seeing which we want to continue on for this next year. So I think that gives you a fair idea of what is happening around here and how Seattle neighborhood greenways and Licking Holler greenways are involved. We do need help. We have a few very active members, mostly from the Greenwood area, a few from the eastern part of North Seattle. And we encourage you to involve yourselves with us. The easiest way to do that is Google Seattle Greenways or look up seattlegreenways.org. The splash page you will originally go to has a place where you can get involved in the local groups. You fill out a form, Seattle Neighborhood Greenways, and gets that to me or whatever local group that is appropriate for your neighborhood, and gets you involved. We meet every Tuesday, every second Tuesday of every month. Right now it's all online, of course, at 7:30. And again, if you go to seattlegreenways.org, you can get referred to Licking Holler Greenways, and we can give you our Google address and put you on our Google account, our Google mail list, so that we can get you when those meetings are happening, the agenda and various issues, the connection numbers for those. So hopefully that helped and was helpful to you. Are there any questions?
That was great. Thank you, Lee. Yeah, thank you for all the updates on the neighborhood. And we, in the past, we've done a blog post on the meetings as well, where we provide links to the different resources that you mentioned. So we'll also put a link there for the Seattle Neighborhood Greenways website, so people can link out from that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I have a few questions that kind of were agreed on before the meeting. And then if folks do have questions, please feel free to start posting them in the chat. Let me see here if I was supposed to show any more controls. Oh, also, I'm going to do a quick screen share here. There's a feature that technical difficulties. Okay, there is a feature. Somehow it's not showing up for me, where you can raise your hand if you want to ask a question. So how do I do this? Share my screen. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen. Hopefully this is showing up. If you go to participants, you will have this icon that's raise your hand, and it'll show up for the moderators. And so we'll unmute you, and then you can ask your question as well. So those are some of the ways that you can ask. So, okay, let's see. And I have my questions for you, Lee. You mentioned that the protest had an impact on how Seattle Neighborhood Greenways is thinking about the mission. And so I have a question, both with the impact of COVID, the differences of impact of COVID on communities of color, as well as the racial justice protests that have been going on. What kind of impact has it had on your mission? You mentioned that it changed somewhat or had some kind of impact on it.
Like in most of Seattle, one of the benefits of protest is it makes people aware, and what Seattle Neighborhood Greenways has actually changed a lot in the last 9 months because of some of the protests. One of the staff members actually was hired because they have a lot of experience dealing with those sort of issues, is spending almost all of his time on equity issues and trying to help local groups help equity in their neighborhood. It's easier where you have large groups of people that have, for some reason or another in the past, bonded together. Like in South Seattle, Central District, you had large groups of people who actually were very successful in bonding and creating organizations that gave them some strength and voice. We've been trying to work with those groups and through the Mass Coalition and others very, very highly. It's a little bit more difficult up here because this is actually one of the more diverse areas in Seattle when you actually look at it. But there haven't been traditionally a whole lot of bonded groups that speak for lots of their group. There are a few, for instance, the Idris Mosque has been very good at speaking for some people. There's an Eritrean group of people that has a church in Licton Springs that has been fairly active, and we try to maintain good relations with and help. But it's difficult up here. One of the things that I'm a little bit nervous about is going into a community, especially a disadvantaged community, as a person that's not disadvantaged and has no background in that, going in and saying, hey, this is what we should do. What I'd rather be doing is listening to the people. I haven't found the groups to listen to yet, and that's always important. And they are existing in South Seattle, West Seattle, Central District, but not in Ballard, Greenwood, up here. And that's one of the big problems in Seattle, in my view. And I don't know how we can help that, but we're trying.
Yeah, and I mean, definitely community organizing in North Seattle is something at the Hollerley Community Club we think about and struggle with as well. So I understand your pain. You mentioned that during the budgeting process for 2021, there's going to be a 20% cut to or currently planned 20% cut to the SDOT budget as proposed by the mayor. And then you talked about how there's hope that some of the budget cuts will be canceled. Can you talk a little bit about what that process is like? Does the budget get voted on, and then if more revenue comes in, it changes, or how does that work?
Okay. As a city, Seattle is required by law and by the financial institutions in general to have a balanced budget every year. and to maintain that balanced budget. So they can't increase, and a number of offices in Seattle sort of do their estimates for income and various things. And that becomes the basis of the mayor's proposed budget. So the mayor's proposed budget, it cannot be exceeded right now. Hence, we have to find ways of adjusting things in the budget. And that's always the big issue. You put more money into one thing, taken out of something else. We have all sorts of social equity issues that have been raised. Lots of those take money, with both with race, with homeless, just all sorts of needs. So how you adjust things is really, really important. We're pushing with others for more equity, for more for better streets, for some of the issues that I've already gone through. But it's very hard. Obviously a lot of things are going to get cut, like the basic bike network. We're pushing hard for some things, but they're likely to get cut. One of the things is the largest budget item in the Seattle's budget is the police department. And there's a real problem with deciding how many officers you have, how many officers, how much they get paid, the nature of things. What we're trying to do is reduce as much as possible of the non-crime related costs out of the police department and put them into other things that can actually end up helping better. Traffic enforcement, there might be better ways of doing that. Automated cameras are one way. Automated cameras train people because it's easier to not get the ticket once you've gotten the ticket once. But it's very unfair to a lot of the really, really poor people. I can afford a $200 ticket. A lot of people get a $200 ticket and there's no way that they can pay it. So one of the things that we're looking at is, can we get a change in state law that allows traffic fines to be adjusted so that the very first fine is very, very small, or maybe just related to traffic itself, get out and help on the road for 8 hours or whatever. But that it increases to dramatically, so that eventually hopefully that would change people's habits. There are a whole lot of issues like that. I mean, I don't want to go into them all, but yeah,
Okay.
One of the other issues I should go into, the nature of the design of the roads is absolutely fundamental for how people drive in terms of speed and in terms of safety. You can make a road that's wide and encourages driving fast, and end up with a very dangerous road for people on bicycles or for people walking. So one of the things we're trying to do is get all design for roads as much as possible to be designed for low speed. And there are all sorts of technical ways you can design a street that lowers the speed of traffic. And that's important. How you treat signals in terms of how people getting across the street. Right now, Mercer being an example, they're using what they call intelligent transportation system. It's some very complicated, expensive system that speeds traffic along, and it doesn't take account of people. So we're proposing, hey, let's not do that until it can be done in such a way that it takes account of when people need to get across and doesn't make people wait through two traffic cycles before the light turns, which is the case on Mercer. And that would be a big savings. That's a multi-million-dollar program that the city is buying to do that. It takes millions and millions to institute that. So I don't know if that answers all your question.
That answers some of it. And just for folks, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but feel free to ask questions now, or like I mentioned, raise your hand or type in something in the chat that says, I want to ask a question, and then we'll unmute you so you can ask a question. I have a couple more questions that I'll keep asking, and then I'll see if others have questions.
Yeah, I have one.
Oh, you have a question? Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
This is Karen. I think I'll speak for myself, but one of my biggest immediate traffic concerns around me is the corner of 125th and Densmore, where there is people flying very quickly around two bends, people speeding from Aurora to that stop sign, 2 bus stops, and that's going to be a feeder into this Ashworth green zone. And I'm just wondering if there's been any talk or planning to put 4-way stop there and crosswalk so that people can safely get across to the bus stops and then also over to this Ashworth Way Greenway.
Actually, they're in the little hexagon of streets around Holler Lake. There are a number of corners like that where several streets come together, and it's very hard for cars to actually get across, harder for people to get across, dangerous for bikes to use. One of the things that Seattle has been very reticent to use are 4-way stop signs, especially on arterials. We had proposed way down on 83rd and Linden. For years, people have been asking for a 4-way stop there. And the city said, no, it's not allowed under the manual of, under the MUTCD, which is the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which is a national code. And we got tired of that. So we looked at it in detail. And in fact, we found that all that it required was reasonable engineering judgment. And we objected to their response on that. We pushed it up the line a bit, and they said, yeah, you're right. And they finally agreed. And now just about anyway, a few months ago, early this year, they put in a 4-way stop sign and painted crosswalks and did a curb bulb. So I think that that's one thing that a number of people from here could actually start dealing with the city. I think that there are some people in the city who would listen, and SDOT who would listen. The way we did it at 83rd, we approached the council members, actually two of them, because Strauss replaced the other. But there are a couple of people in Washington or in SDOT who listened, studied, talked it up the line, and we got them put in.
Okay, so you would.
And we're willing to help you guys if you want. If you wanted to do a major issue, you have buses here, you have students, you have this huge amount of traffic that will eventually be in the area because of the 145th and 130th Street stations.
So if I understood what you heard, if I understood what you said correctly, it doesn't sound like doing anything about that intersection that's a block away from the Greenway is part of the plan for a safe street to Northgate. And if we wanted that intersection at 125th and Densmore addressed, we should do that separately by working with Seattle Greenways and potentially Deborah Juarez.
Yes.
Okay.
I can give you some of the arguments that we used. So, actually, I did quite a study of the MUTCD and to show where there are ways of putting in the four-way stop and being more in line with what the national code requires.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the only other thing that I thought of, and this is totally way off in left field, is to make the circle loop one way, such that the outer circle goes one way for traffic, and the inner loop is another side for pedestrians to be able to bike or walk on. And that sure would slow people down and take care of the issues of all these intersection of cars and people and strange intersections. It, like I said, way off in left field, but it would be a very low cost potential option. And I have not, seen if that's something anyone else who even lives in Holler Lake is interested in, but I just bring it here as a very off the wall thought.
It is a feasible option. Actually, with the study for the 135th Street or 130th Street station, 145th Street station, they're doing major studies on traffic throughout the area. If you look at that map that I showed earlier, both north, south, and east, west. They have some proposals for First Avenue Northeast, for some improved pedestrian facilities along there, and east west, 128th, I think it is, the one that's just south of 130th. They have some proposals for that. One of the problems that they have is it's integral to some bus routes, and they don't. And right now, they prefer to keep the bus routes north-south, going north-south on the same streets as opposed to around there. But it is something worth looking at. It was have implications. The people that currently use 125th, they would then have to, at least one direction would be going around the north end of the lake. And how much that would be a problem, But it's certainly one of the things that should get studied for sure.
Thank you.
I have another question. Kind of, Karen, what you were speaking about made me think of this, but so on Meridian, where students often take the buses to get into Ingram High, on Meridian going north, there's a bus stop at 135th and Meridian, and there's no crosswalk that goes from the bus stop to Ingram High. So it's just two streets intersecting, but so it would take 2 crosswalks to get across to the high school, right? But there's only one. And I guess one of the things, that's kind of not my primary question. My primary question is in terms of the budgeting process, you know, when we're looking at these kind of small local improvements, a sidewalk here, a stop sign there, does it just come out of the general SDOT budget? I'm assuming it's not, like, a specific sidewalk is not part of a budgeting process. So, like, how does that work? How do you advocate for that sort of thing as part of Seattle Neighborhood Greenways?
Okay, a couple of things. Even just putting in a crosswalk can be really hard to get. The general budget doesn't get to that level of detail. They propose big buckets of funds. The SDOT general fund, or the general SDOT fund, is where a lot of it comes from. Street maintenance fund. There are lots of individual funds. Often for projects, you combine a number of the individual projects. As an example, Safe Routes to Schools has always been very relatively well funded compared to other programs. That was one of the things that got cut a lot in the budget. But in the past, we've been able to use Safe Routes to Schools and general funds, some arterial funds, maintenance funds, and combine them all together to get any one project. And it usually takes some savvy to do that. That's one of the reasons having some groups of people like Greenways or like the District 5 network, is there are groups of people that have that savvy who can sort of guide through the process. Having said that, it doesn't always work. There's down in Licking Springs, some great neighborhood people have put in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours on getting a home zone around their neighborhood, and where there's a lot of cut through traffic that will be using their streets to get to the Northgate station, Northgate station. But there's a lot of cut through traffic even before that. They've been working for 3-4 years. They were the original proposed test for a home zone, but that ended up getting cut. They've been applying ever since. We have all sorts of savvy being applied, people who understand, and yet we have not been able to force that one through. Much everyone's dismay.
Understood. Tough work, especially during these times when budget is being slashed so much. I'm not seeing any more questions, and we're nearing the end of the meeting. So
okay.
I wanted to thank you for joining us. I think it's great that we have the recording. I think some other people will come back and look at it as well. Especially today has continued to be a high stress day for a lot of people, but this was amazing. So much information that you've been able to share on the neighborhood and the work that your group does. It's been great to have you here. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. And again, we encourage people to join us, because the more people that we have, the more we can do.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Lee.
Thank you so much. Bye,
Okay.
everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
It's good.